Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Lean, Senior Cloud Advocate at Microsoft, who'll be talking to you today about how to tackle that data center transformation to the cloud. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC21. Don't forget to check out the Resource Center. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click on the resource link at the top. Don't forget our call for speakers is now open. Join us at ESPC21 online from the 1st to the 2nd of June 2021. Simply submit your application at sharepointeurope.com/submit-to-speak before the 5th of February deadline. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have in the questions window. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Sarah Lean. Hello, Sarah.
Thank you, Shane. Hiya. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where everybody is. Hopefully you're seeing the right screen that I'm sharing with you today. And as Shane said, we're going to be talking about how to tackle your data center transformation to the cloud. So please do pop some questions in the chat and we can either deal with them during the session or at the end, depending on what they are. So for those that aren't familiar with me, my name is Sarah Lean. I am a Senior Cloud Advocate at Microsoft. I have been in IT now for well over 14 years, and I'm very much in that IT pro or IT operations type of job role, and that's what I've done, and that's where my passion is. So I always tackle problems from an IT nature from that IT operations standpoint. Now, I'm a big ambassador for STEM activities as well, so encouraging the next generation to go into a science or a technology, an engineering or a mathematics career. Obviously, I love to speak to students about following in my footsteps and becoming someone in the IT industry, so you'll see me doing a lot of work around that. I also organised the Glasgow Azure user group, and unfortunately, because of the current situation, we are having to meet virtually, but it also allows us to expand our speakers and invite more people and also interact more with the community. So if you're looking for some user groups to attend about Azure, please do check us out. We have Twitter and a website where you can find more details around us. Now, please indulge me for a little bit longer because you may have recognised from my accent, I am from Scotland, and I always like to interject a little bit of Scotland into my presentations, especially when I'm talking to a potentially global audience. And I love this photograph of a Highland cow, or a Highland coo, as we say in Scotland, and it was a picture I took a few years ago at an agricultural show that sadly we're not able to attend at the moment, but yeah. Highland cows are native to Scotland and they cope with our weather system quite well. Their furry coats help keep them warm and keep them dry as well. So today we're talking about moving to the cloud, and a lot of organisations are starting to think about that, digital transformation and potentially how it can help solve some problems within their organisation, or even help them leverage the competitive nature that they have within their industry. How can cloud technology help them be better than their competitors? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about those migration projects that a lot of organisations are either embarking on or talking about. When I talk to customers, we are seeing some organisations move because of set reasons. There are a lot of reasons within their organisation that might trigger a migration, but some of the main ones are things like cybersecurity threats. We're seeing cybersecurity threats be a big thing nowadays, and lots of organisations want to take advantage of advanced technology. They want to take advantage of Microsoft's investment within cybersecurity. So Microsoft famously spend over £1 billion dollars every year on cybersecurity. And we use a lot of our knowledge we take from our systems, from our customers' interactions with the cloud technology and technology in general, and build that back into a lot of our products. So lots of organizations are wanting to leverage that and make sure that they are more or less vulnerable, to cybersecurity threats from attackers. Also, lots of people are thinking about on-premise and how they move away from that because they've run out of capacity. Things are maybe getting old and becoming legacy. So a lot of organisations invested a lot of money in making their own data centres, might be in the basement of your office or in an actual data centre location. But a lot of people are now starting to get to the end of that life. You know, it's maybe 3 years since the last big investment, or 5 years, or even 10 or 20 years since they actually invested in the data centre itself. And they're starting to wonder whether it is viable to reinvest in that, to make the technology upgraded, to upgrade the facilities, to deal with all the challenges that we face from a technology point, and also maybe even from a green climate point of view as well, and how they leverage that. So there's lots of trigger points for people moving to the cloud, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Regardless of what your trigger point is and why you're actually moving, we're going to be talking about how you can embark on that migration project. Now, this is a slide I like to show that shows that migrations are not linear. Often our customers think that a migration project might be a simple one, depending on how they view their IT technology and their IT infrastructure. But sometimes it's not as simple as that. There can be hidden things that trip people up, and you maybe need to stop and think about it. You maybe need to pivot. Something might change throughout the project. The driving reason why you're doing this project might change, or you might uncover something that you again didn't know about. And yeah, migration projects are never linear. They are often complex, but at the end of the day, a lot of our customers are finding that it's very worthwhile for them. So please don't be scared by this diagram, but I thought it was good to show you just that the kind of trend that we see our customers go through with a migration project. Now, when we talk about migration projects, we talk about them in really 4 stages. There are 4 key stages that every organisation has to go through, regardless of whether you're moving because your data centre is old and you now need to make a change, or whether you're moving because you want to just leverage the cloud and you want to add that technology portfolio into your infrastructure. You really should be following these 4 key stages within your project. So the first one is discovery, second one is assessment, third one is migrate, and the fourth one is operations. And we're going to be talking about each of those stages and really driving into the key learnings that we need to remember when we embark on these stages. I'm going to share some of the knowledge from other customers and some of the tips and stuff around it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. These projects, though, are not just technology focused. I see a lot of customers focus fully on the technology and forget about everything else, and often that can lead to failure. But these migration projects depend on people and they depend on technology. Now, when I talk about these projects depending on people, I'm talking about the IT people, so your developers, your database engineers, your project managers, your operations teams, the whole of your IT department, everybody that makes up your IT department will drive the success of this project. But it's not just them that we're talking about as well, it's also your end users, your business stakeholders, the people that actually use all of your IT equipment every day, whether that be just checking their email or whether it be a complex bit of software that helps release finances and your POs and stuff like that. These people are important to this project as well, and we'll be talking about them throughout the different stages and how you should be interacting with them and how you should think about them when you are at those key project stages. Another thing that a lot of organisations forget about is defining what the success measure for this project can be. Now, if you are moving from your old or on-prem data centre and you're migrating into the cloud, you might just be migrating because you don't have any capacity. You don't have the latest and greatest technology, latest and greatest servers and hardware in that data centre, but there's no real driving deadline. There's no real milestone within your company that says, right, we need to be out of this data center by X, and if we're not, we're in trouble. Some people do move from their on-prem data center because they have a hard deadline. Contract might be up for renewal, so they know that that deadline is coming and when that is. I've had customers who have had to get out of their data center because it's been bought by a compulsory purchase by the government to build a train line through it, and they had a hard and fast deadline. They could not stretch that project out beyond that date. It just wasn't viable. The bulldozers were coming in at some point, so they had to have their technology out. So yeah, what is your business's success measure? You might know what your trigger point is, but what's going to be the success measure? At what point will your project be successful or not be successful? And I think it's key that you have to define that at some point so that you know when the project has ended, when you can maybe go off and celebrate and have a drink or have some dancing and food with your project team. But you also need to have that success measure so as that you can report back to your leadership team and say, yes, this project has completed, or no, this project hasn't completed, and we haven't met that success measure yet, and then we need X, Y, and Z to help us meet that success measure. So although you might know what the trigger point is for your migration project, make sure you're also defining what the success measure is for you and your leadership team so the expectations are all at the right point that they need to be for these type of projects. Now, going to the project stages, if we talk about discovery, which is the first phase of your project, we have to start to look at what's in our IT departments. What does our IT departments actually look like? Now, a lot of people will say that they know their IT department, they know all the servers, they know all the usernames, they know all the names, they know all the applications, they know all the ports that are open and need closed and everything about that. But I have never actually found that to be true, unfortunately. A lot of customers say, yes, we have it all down, we know exactly what's going to happen. They skip the discovery phase, and then halfway through the assessment or the migration, they find something that they did not know about, something that's been put in temporarily and has been forgotten about and actually causes a massive problem throughout the assessment and the migration and the future planning of this project. So please don't skip this stage within the project, because there is always going to be something that you uncover or has been documented wrong or someone has forgotten about or has been changed, and you will discover that, and you need to think about these touch points. Now, when you're doing this discovery, you should be thinking about those things. How do your servers, how do your workloads all interact with each other? What are they dependent upon? What ports do they use? Do they need to run in a user context? Do they need to their services have to be spun up in a certain way once that server is spun up? Does the application, the workload, only run on a server GUI? So that will define your migration path. If it needs to reside on a virtual machine, is there another alternative that maybe runs within a serverless type technology? You have to understand all of this, and you might have to start to dig in about who made this software, who did we buy it off of, is it internal? All these kinds of questions need to be asked. Also, questions about personally identifiable information. Do you have any of that within any of your databases? Do you store that? Are you allowed to store that within the cloud, depending on your regulatory compliance within your organization, your sector, your country? How do you deal with all of that? Look at making diagrams as well. If you don't have diagrams, make sure they're up to date, make sure the aid is there. It might sound like a lot of work, and for some organisation it is a lot of work, but at the end of the day, if you find all this information and you have it all together, then it will make some of the decisions later on in the project much easier for you, because you've found all that information and there's only really one path that workload can either migrate, or maybe it can't migrate, but the information that you collect will help you define how that migration plan looks like in the future. Now, I'm definitely not advocating that you sit and you log into every server, you check every service, you check every event log, and you note that down pen and paper, old school style. Absolutely not. There is tooling out there that can help you gather this information. But this is a key point as well. This is a key decision point for a lot of organisations. And again, I've seen them do it wrong because they've jumped on the very first product or the very first tool that they've heard of, tried to use it, and it's not fit for their purposes. So there's tools out there that can help you discover all the information that you need for your project plan. These tools interact differently with your environment. The one that we have at Microsoft is called Azure Migrate Server Assessment. And it is a great tool. I do love it. I do recommend it. And I recommend it for certain organisations in certain scenarios. And again, this will depend on what your organisation's needs are. So with server assessment from Microsoft, you have to either install an agent to help discover some of that information if you're running in a physical or a Hyper-V environment. If you're running in a VMware environment, we don't need you to install an agent onto all of your servers. We can gather the information we need interacting with your vCenter server. So for some organizations that will work fantastically for them because maybe they are running all on VMware and it's really easy to interact with their vCenter. They can get the security clearance that they need to pull that information from the vCenter server. For other organizations that might not work because they might run in a Hyper-V or they might have lots of physical servers and security isn't happy about either an agent being installed on those servers or even just from an operations point of view. It would take too long to go through the kind of process to approve that application and test it on all the servers. So you really need to think about how these tools collect the information. Do they need an agent? Do they not need an agent? Do they need certain firewall ports open? Can we get all of that open again? Again, it will depend on how your infrastructure is set up. Also think about these tools where they're storing the information. Now, Azure Migrate takes the information that it collects from your servers and then pushes it into Microsoft Azure for your assessment and for you to break down and understand. Some of the other tools do that as well. Other tools keep that information on-prem. So they gather it on-prem and they keep that information on-prem for you. So depending on where you are on your cloud journey, you might not want to push that information up into the cloud. Security teams might not be happy with it. It might be a sticking point and it could slow you down. Now, often this information is only things like your server name and maybe an IP address. It's not confidential information as such, but again, some security teams, some organizations might not be comfortable with that information going up to the cloud depending on where they are in their cloud journey. So when you're looking at a tool to help you do the discovery piece, evaluate all these points, evaluate how it interacts with your servers, where it stores the data, and lastly, how much it costs. Azure Migrate Server Assessment Tool is free. Some of the other tools are also free, but again, some of them actually charge, and some of them charge per license or agent that you install on servers. So if you have 1,000 servers, it can start to add up. So again, you really evaluate what your organization needs and how these tools are going to interact with your organization and your servers as well. But please do utilize the tools. No one wants anybody to sit there and have to log on to every server, do IP traces, do pull up an MMC snap-in and make a note of every service that's there. No one wants anybody to do that. So definitely look at tooling that can help you on your journey in the discovery phase. Now, as I said, these projects don't just hang on the technology, they also hang on finding the right information around from your people in your organisation, the business owners, the end users in your organisation. And this is where you should start to talk to them about what that workload looks like for them. How do they use that every day? What is the workload life cycle? I've been part of IT departments where other departments, so say for example the HR department, have tapped on our door and said, we've bought a new bit of software, can you help us install it? And that was the first interaction that we've ever had, and we've ever spoke to them about this bit of software. So please make sure you're speaking to these business owners, understanding if they're maybe off already having conversations about renewing these workloads, doing something different with them, because that could affect your project plan as well. If they're already doing something, then you need to make sure that it aligns with your future plans and they're aware of that and they have the support nature around all of that as well. Looking at understanding these workloads, look at, is anybody using them? Have you been running it in your IT data center for a few months and no one's been using it because they've replaced it again without your knowledge of using it, and you should have shut those servers off. So again, speak to the people that are using your workloads, interact with them, understand what's happening from their point of view, because at the end of the day, you're delivering this project as much for them as for the IT department as well. You don't want to cause any rifts, and you don't want to upset anybody if something goes wrong. You want to make sure that the communication plans and the communication is open fully, so that you can work with these people that are using these workloads and hopefully reduce your calls, your support tickets at the end once the migration project has happened as well. Now, in terms of speaking to the people within the IT department, you should be thinking about asking them about the training, looking at the short-term plan for your training and looking at the long-term plan for your training as well. Years gone by, we used to send IT individuals off on a course for a week. They would sit there for the week, learn that bit of software, maybe sit the exam, and then that would be them. They'd be trained for the next 5 or 10 years until another bit of software came out. That's no longer the case. It's absolutely not the case. You constantly have to be learning with the cloud, and you have to be keeping up to date with that. And if you're looking to migrate all of your workloads up into the cloud, or even just a portion of them up into the cloud, you make sure that your IT department know how to support that. The last thing that you want to do is move all your workloads from a place where everybody knows them up into a place where no one knows how to work the system. So short term, you should be looking at upskilling your staff, making sure they're aware of all the technologies and have a good understanding so they can support the project. And also long term, what are you going to do once the migration project is off? Are you going to continue that training regimen? How are you going to support your staff to continually keep up to date with the cloud and the ever-changing platform that it is? Now, in terms of costing, it is definitely something you should be thinking about. Lots of organisations ask for a cost comparison against the existing cost versus what it would cost in the cloud. And this can be quite hard for a lot of organisations, because if your data centre, if your servers are all running, say, in the basement of the office block where the rest of your staff are, the IT department might never see things like the security bill for the building. They might not see the electricity that it takes to run all of those servers. They might be well aware of how much hardware it is and the staffing costs that go into running that IT department. But again, things like electricity and maybe security are kind of hidden costs to your data center on-prem. But when you cost up something in the cloud, that is very much built into the price. So you need to make sure that when you are comparing the cost of your existing IT infrastructure to what you potentially want to look like in the cloud, you need to make sure you're comparing it correctly. We have some tools at Microsoft, the total cost of ownership calculator and the Azure pricing calculator can help you with those costs. The total cost of ownership calculator, we've taken a lot of information from other customers and tried to follow through the trends and how much other people spend on their IT equipment. So if you don't have this information, you can use the total cost of ownership calculator to try and help estimate your costs and kind of get a better idea, so that you can compare and contrast the cloud and existing costs. Otherwise, you'd be comparing costs that aren't equivalent to each other. Now, that's the discovery part of your project. It might seem like there's a lot of work to it, but it will pay off in the long run if you spend the time doing the legwork around the discovery. Then the assessment phase and the migration phase should be a lot easier. Now, the assessment phase is about taking that information that you've gathered and now starting to strategize, now starting to think about what direction your organisation is actually going to go in with this migration project. You'll be starting to think about what workloads can be moved up into the cloud, what workloads don't make sense to be moved into the cloud, and what workloads can be moved in a different form. Could we start to actually redesign some of our workloads and maybe not use virtual machines, maybe use some serverless technology? But you should also be thinking about other things like how are you going to manage these resources in the cloud? You've maybe now entering into a hybrid state where you've still got some workloads on-prem and you've still got some workloads in the cloud. How are you going to manage that? Because that's two different locations. Are there any tools out there that can help you manage them, help you maintain the kind of security posture, even just the management posture, make sure things are patched, make sure the right ports are open, make sure people are following the right naming convention. There's lots of things that you have to think about in terms of the management of all of this as well. Things like backup and disaster recovery, you probably or should have those kind of plans in place for your on-prem environment. What are your plans going to be like in the cloud? Do you have to change your on-prem backup and disaster recovery plans to help build into this new hybrid environment and help build in these new cloud environments and workloads that you have? Or are you going to have to run two separate bits of backup software, bits of disaster recovery software? Again, start to think about these, start to think about, is that existing backup software, hopefully you've discovered this information, but is that backup software compatible with the cloud, or do I need to look at starting to actually not only migrate our workloads, but maybe look at replacing our backup solution as well? So there's lots of decision points that you need to make around what your future looks like in the cloud. But again, hopefully if you've done all the work in the discovery phase, it'll be a lot easier, and these kind of strategy meetings with all the team will go a lot smoother, and you'll understand and you'll be able to see that clear path for the migration quite easily for your organization. Now, I touched on governance. Governance within the cloud is absolutely something you should be thinking about. Cost management, how you secure your workloads within the cloud. Where does your responsibility lie? Where does the cloud provider's responsibility lie? How are you going to keep your resources consistent? How are you going to make sure people don't just name things after their favourite movie star, or are going to capitalise things or not going to capitalise things? They're going to add in special characters where they shouldn't be adding special characters. Things like that may seem like trivial decisions, but they are important, again, in the long term of you trying to look after your workloads in the cloud and trying to operate maybe in this hybrid mode that you might have within your environment now. Thinking about deployment acceleration, and that's a fancy way of thinking about how are you going to deploy your workloads. Are you going to be sitting there logged into, say, the Azure portal within a web browser and deploying everything, or are you going to start to look at infrastructure as code? And when you start to look at infrastructure as code, what language are you going to use? You don't necessarily need to answer this question right now. You don't need to know that answer before you start your migration project, but you need to be starting to think about it. So if you want to go down the route of infrastructure as code and you want to use something like Terraform, but none of your staff know how to use infrastructure as code, don't know Terraform, this is the time to identify that as the route going forward and build that into your training plan. Start to send people off on courses, start to help them identify resources that they might need in order to have that. Maybe it's a free Azure account where they can go and spin up some resources, they can test their Terraform scripts. This is the point to start to think about it, start to strategize about what's going to happen, so that, say, in 6 months' time, you will start to use infrastructure as code with Terraform. Right now, you might just use the Azure portal, but in 6 months' time, you want to be using that infrastructure as code. So again, start to have the discussion, start to think about what's happening within your environment, and start to plan ahead for that. Also, at the assessment stage, once you've made some of these decisions, you should start to think about your landing zone within your cloud provider. And a landing zone is really just that basic kind of infrastructure that you need, the basic plumbing that you need in order to support your workloads. So if you're building an actual physical data center, there are certain things that you need. So you'll need things like electricity, you'll need the internet, and you'll maybe need some racks to put your servers into. In the cloud, there's no difference. You do need, there's different things that you need, but there's no difference in terms of there are some things that you need to be able to start your deployment, starting to put in some workloads. Things like identity. So how are you going to actually log in to your cloud provider? What does your security posture look like? What networking subnets are you going to have? these are things that you have to think about, and you have to think about how that all looks, and you start to build that landing zone up, start to build that architectural diagram, and plan all of that out as well. Now, the next thing that you have to think about is, how are you actually going to do this migration? Are you going to use your in-house staff and have some of them maybe come off of their business as usual activity, stop triaging those support tickets that come in every day, and actually focus on the migration? Are you going to maybe split their time, so they're doing business as usual activity and then half of the time they're working on this project? Or are you going to outsource it to a partner? Bring in someone who deals with migrations, who can bring their knowledge around migration, some of the sticking points, and help you with that migration, so that your in-house staff can maybe concentrate a bit more on the business as usual stuff and not be overloaded. There are great advantages to both, if I'm honest, and there are also disadvantages to both. Your in-house staff should know all your workloads. They should know all the people that they need to talk to, and they can really use that experience and knowledge to help. But then they might not necessarily have ever carried out a migration project. This might be the only one that they'll ever carry out, and they'll never do another one again. So is it worthwhile upskilling your staff on how to deal with a migration? Is it worth the hassle of maybe taking them off the normal business as usual activity that you have in your IT department? How are you going to deal with that kind of workload? If you bring in a partner, yes, they'll have migration experience. They may have done thousands of them and be able to integrate quite quickly, but they won't have the in-house knowledge of all your workloads. They won't know who to ask if there's a favour needed, and they won't have that kind of business knowledge. So, and obviously there'll be a cost associated to that. So you need to think about it, but both options should be put on the table, and you should work out which best is for your organisation. And again, what's your success measure? If you have a really tight deadline, it might be great to bring in external people to help you with that migration, so that you can try and meet that deadline and actually achieve your success measure, or just backfill some of your staff. So again, think about them, discuss them, and find the best way for your organisation. You should also be thinking about tooling. There was tooling that helped you with the discovery piece, that helped you understand what was happening within your environment. But we also have tooling that can help you with the migration, that can automate some of the migration and take some of the planning and help you with that. At Microsoft, we have Azure Migrate, server migration tool, and again, it's part of the discovery tool. So if you've used the discovery tool, it can help feed a lot of that information into the migration tool and actually help make it a lot easier for you to migrate some of your workloads. But again, there's other tools out there, and you should be thinking, again, like the discovery tools, thinking about how do these migration tools actually interact with your servers, your workloads. Do they need agents installed? Do they need other security ports open that we're maybe not happy to open? How are we going to deal with that? And what's the price point of these tools as well? Again, it's really important to evaluate what's out there to help you evaluate maybe what's internally already. I know a lot of backup tools nowadays can actually help you with the migration part. You can maybe do it as if it's a failover, if there's been a disaster recovery event, and you can migrate your workload there. You might already have the licensing within your organisation. So make sure, again, you're discovering these kinds of things and thinking about them in a thorough manner. Again, I've seen tons of customers pick the wrong tool for the migration, and again, it's stopped them, it's had to make them pivot, it's made the project go longer, it's made their funding go longer. Leadership start to think that the cloud isn't the right way to go for their organisation because of these wrong decisions by people maybe being enticed by the free product, or the product that doesn't need an agent installed on workloads and might save you time at one end but causes you a whole load of hassle at the other end. So again, look at these tools, think about what your organisation needs, and hopefully pick the right one for your organisation's needs. At this stage, you should also be thinking about your communication plan. How are you going to communicate these migrations? How are you going to communicate these changes to your end users, your business users, your IT department, your leadership team? How does that all look, and who's going to take control of that? The last thing that you want is for someone to do a migration at, say, 3 AM, complete the migration, head off to their bed, and when someone else comes in to do the early shift, you know, 8 AM and pick up those support tickets, they find that stuff is broken. They don't know how things work because the communication plan hasn't been followed through and no one knew what had to be communicated to who, or the communication has went to the wrong person. Make sure you're planning these things out. They don't necessarily come naturally to a lot of the IT department. You might need to bring in a project manager or someone else from another department to help you make sure you get that communication plan correctly. But again, start to think about these things, start to think about how you're going to deal with this, and make sure that you're communicating properly so that people are aware of the changes and aren't getting the wrong impression of this migration project, of your new cloud platform, because unfortunately I've seen that as well with some customers. Once you've decided what your migration plan looks like, how you're going to do all this and where your workloads are going to go, it's time to actually start to implement it, start to get down and dirty with this technology and use it. Everybody's migration is going to be different depending on the solution that they've picked, whether they're going all cloud, they're going hybrid, they're maybe going all infrastructure as a service, or maybe someone is going all as platform as service. Everybody's migration stage is going to look slightly different, but there are some key things that you need to think about. Please don't start with the most critical workload within your organisation. For most organisations, the most critical workload in your organisation is going to be your payroll application. Everybody wants to get paid at the end of the day or the end of the month. So the last thing that you want to do is mess up that application. You don't want to start to move it into the cloud and it doesn't work and you start to panic and people don't get paid because of the outages. What you want to do is start with the least impactful workload within the environment. It might be something simple within the IT department. It might be your knowledge base server, might be the server that hosts the canteen and lunch menu for everybody. Pick something that's not going to be impactful in your organisation. If you move it and something goes wrong, if you've missed a step and something goes wrong and it's not available for a number of hours, that way you can learn, you can grow, you can iterate your process. If you start with the most critical application within your environment, what's going to happen is it's going to be a bad reputation. Your boss is going to be banging on the door, screaming and shouting at you, and you're probably going to have a crisis meeting saying, is moving to the cloud the right solution? And you're going to have to try and defend that plan that you've done and what happened. If you pick a non-critical application and you move it and there's an outage, maybe half a dozen people are going to be affected and it's going to be inconvenient for them, but it's not going to be massively impactful on the whole of the organisation. So you can say that, yes, we made a mistake, but we've learned from it, and the next application we're going to change our plan and we're going to redress it and we're going to build up. So start small and build up. It just makes sense. You know, if you were learning a new hobby, if you were learning how to skateboard, you probably wouldn't start to do backflips and jumps and massive things like that. You would start off just on a straight line on a flat surface. So it's the same with the migration plan. Start small and build up to the big tricks as such. Make sure your communication and your documentation is constantly up to date. Again, I know it's going to be a pain having to send out emails, maybe having to sit there at 3 AM once you've just done a migration and update documentation, but it means that issues can be dealt with. The right information is all there for the next people coming on shift to deal with that. I did have a customer who migrated a workload out of hours, and the classic thing, they did not update the documentation, they did not tell the support staff coming in the next morning, and they couldn't access the server. The support staff had a checklist that they had to run through every morning. They couldn't find the server, it wasn't there, so they did the thing that they usually do, walk into the server room and power on the server. Now that caused massive issues because that server was no longer there, it was decommissioned, and the new workloads were in the cloud, and things were starting to communicate both to the on-prem server and to the cloud server, and lots of data got missed and transposed. So yeah, it caused a massive headache. So make sure that communication plan and that documentation is constantly updated every time you make a change, every time you migrate something, so that everybody knows where to go and what has happened. Try and automate where you can. As you grow with these migration plans and you start to learn how they do them, you'll start to get that there's tasks that you have to complete at every migration, and maybe you can speed them up by automating them. As you get more confident within the environment, as you get more confident with the migrations, you can start to leverage some of the automations, start to schedule some of these migrations maybe to happen without you being there. Some of the different tasks, think about that and try and make this process a lot more easier and a lot less with the human element. Often, you know, we've all done it, we've all pressed the wrong button, we've all configured something differently than we should do depending on the documentation by mistake. If you try and automate some of this, hopefully you won't have that human element, that human error that could happen within these processes as well. Have things like checklists. Maybe you have to go old school and you have to get a printed out checklist where everybody has to tick that they've done a certain stage, sign it off and put that into the project folder, so that everybody knows that things were done in the right order, things were done in the right process, and you're not forgetting anything. But again, automate if you can. If there's any of that kind of process or checklist that you can automate, try and take out that human error element within the project. Now, once you've finished that migration project, part of it or part of the project, the next stage is to think about the operations, and this is probably a stage that will go on forever, to be honest, within your environment. But this is where you get to start to iterate, you start to grow, you start to use the knowledge that you have from the environment and the project that you've just completed, and build on it, and build on things like, how do we deal with our cloud operations? Are there things that we could be doing better? Can we do some things more efficiently now? Could we now leverage a different technology to do something because everything's in the cloud, or we now have the access to it, we now know where it is and can do some things with it? Think about how you can streamline things and how you can better make use of the cloud technology that you have and build that into your day-to-day processes. Thinking about your training, again, like I said at the very start, your long-term training plan, what does that look like? How often do you have to maybe give your staff a half hour or an hour a week, a month to maybe go off and do some self-study? Do you need to give them some Azure credits to go and be able to have an environment where they can play and they can press some buttons and they can see what happens, and they can do that in a safe environment where they're not touching production or any of your dev and test environments? What does that look like for you? How can you make that more efficient, and how can you build on that again for your staff? There's lots to operating within the cloud, maybe operating in the hybrid thing. Maybe you can introduce some new tools, as I said. But now is this time to start to take all that knowledge that you have from that migration project. Maybe you've learned it yourself, maybe you've used a partner, maybe you can start to use some of the knowledge that they taught you and build that into your operations and make things much better for your whole organisation. Now, just to summarise some of the key learnings that I talked about today, things like, what does your success look like? Make sure you're defining that for the project. Involve the business at every stage along the project. Make sure you're speaking to them about the potential migration. Make sure you're communicating if you do touch one of their workloads and it could impact them. Try and script and automate where you can. Don't have everybody clicking 20 boxes when you could maybe automate that process and make it a lot easier. Choose the right tools for the job. Like I mentioned, there's some tools that Microsoft have that are available for people looking to migrate to the cloud. They might be the right tools for your organisation, but maybe a third-party tool is the right one for your organisation. So again, pick the right one for your organisation. Track and optimize your spend. Cost management is very different from on-prem than what it is in the cloud. Make sure you're learning about that, make sure you're educating yourself, and make sure you're tracking and optimizing that spend and making the most of your money within the cloud nowadays. Now, there are a lot of resources that I can share today to help you with things that I've talked about. The Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure is a great resource that can help you with the process, the people, the technology around working, migrating and operating in the cloud. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely do have a look at it. It has simple information around naming conventions for all the different resource types within Azure, all the way up how to build a business case to actually get that project for your migration approved. So definitely check it out and bookmark it for future resources. The Azure Architecture Center is also a great resource that I think you should bookmark. It has great information about how you can architect different types of workloads within the cloud. So simple things like a web front end with a database back end. There's architectural diagrams around that. There's also more complex ones around SAP workloads, various different things, and we're constantly adding to it. So again, another resource to bookmark and have a look at and check out when you're working in the cloud. Now, the next resource is the Azure Migration Center. It has lots of guidance about the migration project and the process, the tools available, and also the partners that could potentially help you on your migration journey as well. So definitely check that out, see what the team are saying there. Hopefully a lot of it mirrors what I've been saying today. And overall, if you want to get in touch with me, please do reach out to me. My contact details are on screen. I've also got a summary of the resources and some more resources as well around what I've been talking about today. Thank you so much for the time today. Hopefully that's all been useful to you. I'm not sure if there's been any questions. I haven't seen them come in, but hopefully Shane can point me in the right direction if I've missed any. But again, thank you everybody for your time today. And yeah, has there been any questions, Shane, that I've maybe missed or?
Thanks for a great presentation, Sarah. Yeah, we will now start the questions and answers part, and should anyone wish to ask a question, they can type them into the questions window now. There's been no questions really. One question only was, will the slides be available? Perhaps you can send them on to me and I can share them, or
Yeah,
can people
I can share
download
that.
them from somewhere?
Yeah, I can share them, Shane, or I'll put a link on the link that's on screen as well to download them as well, so we can have them in two places for everybody.
Yeah, brilliant. If you can share them with me, I'll put them on the page. So when I send everyone the presentation later today, they'll be able to get the slides and download them. Apart from that,
Awesome.
Sarah, we don't have any other questions. Just a few people saying, great presentation, very informative. Thank you for your time. So on behalf of the ESPC community, thank you for taking the time today to complete this webinar. We really do appreciate it. Okay, everybody, just bear with me here as I get back to my own screen. So a big thank you to Sarah today for today's webinar. This is the end of today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. Take care and goodbye.